Good morning. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning with us. This webinar is brought to you by The Edge Singapore in collaboration with SMU, Singapore Management University, Lee Kong Chian School of Business. The Singapore Management University Executive MBA program is uniquely positioned to meet the needs of global senior leaders who are keen on business innovation and personal growth. The innovative curriculum is designed in consultation with more than 100 business leaders in Asia to prepare senior executives for the challenges of leading organizations in a rapidly growing Asian markets. For questions about the SMU Executive MBA program, you may also type them in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and it will be answered by a friendly SMU representative, or you can scan the QR code on your screen for more information. The Edge Singapore delivers timely, insightful news and actionable analysis to our readers to help them make better and informed investment decisions. Okay, read the edge. Okay, COVID-19 has altered the concept of work as we know it. So how will this actually affect the future of the workforce? What can senior management and business owners do to overcome such change during these disruptive times? Is it a good time to invest and upgrade yourself? So for our webinar today, our program flow will consist of three main parts, where our first speaker will share about the workforce of the future, followed by a panel session, and last but not least, the Q&A session. So for the panel session, we do have the honor of a couple of distinguished panelists gracing the panel today. And firstly, we have Ms. Wendy Wong, Regional Director, the People at Work, who will be the moderator of the panel. Okay. Next, we have Mr. Eugene Goh, Co-founder, TalentKraft, Mr. Ma Ying Perek, CEO, Institute for Human Resource Professionals, IHRP, Ms. Tan Chi Wei, VP of Human Resources for Northeast and Southeast Asia, Shell. And of course, we have Dr. Hoon, who is an Associate Professor of Organizational Behaviour and Human Resources at Singapore Management University, Lee Kong Chian School of Business. Okay, so now if any of you have any questions for our speakers at any point of time, do key in at the bottom of your screen and our panelists will do their best to answer them during the Q&A session. You can also upvote those questions that you would like to be answered to bring the question up in terms of order. Okay, so first up, we would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Hoon, who is the Associate Professor of Organizational Behaviour and Human Resources at Singapore Management. So Professor Tan's research interests are in the areas of interpersonal trust, cross-cultural awareness, and workplace emotional management. She also consults for organizations such as Roche Singapore and is actively involved in executive level teaching locally and globally. For today, she will be sharing about the workforce of the future and how to manage remotely effectively. Dr. Tan, please.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Cole, and good morning to all of you. Let me share my screen for now, and we'll start the conversation. I'm very pleased to be here to talk about what to do with the workforce of the future. Now, we know that things have changed, all right? And the key is, how can we manage this change amidst all the disruption around us? And if you look at what has happened in the last few months, well, for the whole of 2020 at least, what is very disconcerting to employees and to all of us at work is the fact that in terms of time and space, we seem to have created some disjoint. All right, we no longer seemingly are in the same time space. And how do we then manage that? So before we even start thinking about how to manage, let's look at the employees. That means the people who are experiencing the change. How are they doing that? All right, so what are the challenges employees face when they, have to work from home, when they have to change their schedules, when they have to immediately lock the entire, from what I know, some of my colleagues bring the desktop home actually. So let me tell you a story before we start. So a couple of weeks ago, a colleague called me. This is a staff colleague, not a faculty colleague. All right, and she was very interesting. She said, Hoon, I have an issue. Could you help me? I need to work with my people. And I said, what is it that is going on? And she said, I have this stuff. She is in her 20s. At meetings, she's losing it. And I said, what do you mean losing it? She said, well, when we were, discussing A, she goes to B and she's not able to connect back to A. And we have to keep telling her, come back to A. She is fine. She's mentally sound, but she doesn't seem to be able to focus. I think one of the key things that's happening now with all these changes is employees are unable to focus on work. And there are, of course, many reasons for doing that, for being unable to focus. All right, chief of which is, of course, the fact that, they are in a different space. They are no longer in a work environment. In fact, 2 weeks later, so a few weeks later, this same colleague called me and she said, she's doing so much better. We went back to office on the day we can, and we were able to get a lot more work done. She was focused, she got work done, la, 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 la. So, it sets me thinking, all right, one of the key things, of course, is that there's no structure in her day. All right, and so at the end of this presentation that I'm going to give, I'm going to provide some strategies as to how you can manage. But before that, we have to think about some other foundations of the issues facing these people. All right, so focus is one of the key challenges. Can I also suggest that multiple roles, that is the other challenge. All right, so when I said multiple roles, what do I mean? Well, the same faculty colleague who called me, staff colleague, she said, you know what? I have to work with my kids on their homework. All right, she's at the age where she, has school-going kids, and the kids need her to work with them when they have to study from home. All right, and she said, I'm also a mother, I'm also a parent, I'm also this, I'm also that. So, what can I do? All right, what can I do to, work with them? Because, hey, my goodness, I have to keep working with them on the different tabs to submit their homework. And she said, I'm also losing it. All right, so multiple roles, especially I think challenges for employees who have to work from home or work from anywhere is that they don't now go to work and be focused at work. All right, the other challenge that we can see happening around us is the fact that, when you are remotely located, sometimes there's no access to information. All right, so what do you do, when you need, in the past, if you need a piece of information, you walk to the colleague next door and you said, hey, next cubicle, can you help me with this? Could you tell me that? All right, now you have to WhatsApp, you have to do all kinds of stuff to get that information. And of course, one of the most interesting invention in SMU, at least, I think it's an invention, but you may not agree with me, is the fact that we go on Microsoft Teams. All right, so all my colleagues are on Teams and they chat on Teams. I think that helps. All right, so access to information is another challenge. And of course, at the end of the day, the question is, or the issue that most people are now facing is the fact of social isolation. We are stuck at home, all right, especially during the we won't call it circuit breaker days. We can't go anywhere. We are working from home alone. I had a few happy hours online with my colleagues at 10 in the evening, but that's pretty much it. We are isolated. So these are some of the ways in which employees and all of us are experiencing work at this moment. So the question for us is, how do you manage? All right, so this from the employee's perspective. Now, let's look at the challenges from the employer's or the manager's perspective. Of the icons or acronyms out there, work from home is the one we're most familiar with. However, there is also work from anywhere. All right. I don't know if you have heard of this concept before, but I know we do that. We work in cafes, etc. We work in different continents. And then with telecommuting as well. I mean, what are some of the challenges managers face? So let me tell you the key challenge I think managers face is the idea of FaceTime. All right. So if I remember many years ago when I was doing my PhD, and some of my classmates, they tell me, Hoon, please go stand in front of the professors and tell them you are around and talk to them. Because you see, PhD students, we like to do our own things. We sit in our own little cubicles. We don't work. And they said, no, you have to have FaceTime. They need to see your face. They need to know you. They need to know what you're doing. And the same for managers. They really want to have FaceTime. They want to see that you are in the office and you are doing work. And I think the key is, how do they see the unseen? I like this term particularly because, hey, you can't see your employees. I remember a couple of weeks ago, again, one of my colleagues called me and she said, Wee Hoon, is it possible for me to request that, my people, my direct reports, turn on their webcam in WebEx so that I can see them all the time throughout the day to make sure they are working? In my head, I was thinking, my goodness, if you were to monitor them all the time, where do you get time to do work? All right, so I think this is one of the mindsets that we have, that we keep thinking we need to see the unseen. All right, and of course, the fact that do we still work 8 to 5 and what kind of hours is it? So this idea of being, disjointed in time and space is creating a lot of challenges for us. All right, so of course, one of the key, results or key solution is to say, hey, how do we manage by outcomes? Do we manage by outcomes now? What happened to the process? Because we're so used to managing by process. All right, and before I delve into the strategies, let me say that in my mind, it is not changing your skill set to manage differently. All right, let me say, in my mind, it is changing the way you think about your people. All right, and the way you think about work. And let me say this, COVID is the best and perfect time for managing change in organization. All right, so what do I mean by that? Let me just say that at the end of the day, whatever we do in organization, the foundation is trust. So the first question I want all of you to think about is this. What is our assumption about our employees? Do we think that they come to work because they want to shrug? Or do we think they come to work and they want to do a good job? In fact, think about it. Who comes to work wanting to do a shoddy job? I bet none of us do. All of us want to do a good job. All of us want to be the best that we can be, isn't it? So why is it that we hold on to the mindset that our employees need to be monitored? Because we don't trust them. We don't trust them to get work done. We think they are going to shrug, right? I think that's the idea, right? Of having a cam on where the person worked the whole day. What is our assumption about our people? Do we believe that they really want to do a good job? And in my mind, I believe that's the case. All right. And that leads to a very interesting question, right? How do you decide that your people can be trusted? How do you decide that, they are able, all right, to, get work done? In your mind, what happens? How do you make that assessment? All right. And let me suggest that in our academic literature, we actually have a very strong foundation of research on trust. In fact, all of you, if you've read my CV, knows that I work on trust. And the key is, let me say, when we think about trusting somebody, we actually look at 3 factors. All right. In the research that I've done, we found that people assess, number one, to decide whether they trust you or not, number one thing they do is to look at how competent you are. So in my slide, I call it ability. So it's the competence of your people. Do you believe that they can deliver the work? All right. So that's the number 1 criteria. The second criteria is what I call integrity. Well, what do you mean by integrity? Well, integrity could mean that, we share the same values. And the fact that we've been in an organization together for a long time means we do share similar values, all right, or at least the organization's values. Integrity also means that people say what they do all right, or work or do what they say, rather, not say what they do, but they do what they say, and they deliver, all right, and they are able to, be consistent and be reliable. All right, and the last one, which is to do with relationships. All right, so the first two, ability and integrity, actually has got to do with your own self-attributes, right? So I'm competent, I have the right values, but it's me. Whereas when you talk about trust, it's really a relationship between two people, between you and your people. All right, so to what extent do you know that your employees, that your staff has good intentions towards you and wants to do good to you, okay? And when you think about that, and so when we look at whether I trust you or not and whether you trust me or not, it really depends in our research on these three large factors. The fact that people are competent, they have the right values, and there is this need or want to do good, all right, to each other. So let me say this, it's not what skill sets you bring or what skill sets you cultivate. I think those you can learn readily, but more importantly, it is the trust that you have towards your people. All right, another mindset that has to be changed, I think, is our idea of, so other than trust, the idea of effort versus outcomes. To what extent do we reward effort? To what extent do we reward outcomes? All right, and of course, in the area of performance management, that's where my students who are HR practitioners tell me that they are experiencing the biggest challenge. How do we do performance management? And later on, I'm sure in the panel, we're going to talk on that. All right, so how do we communicate expectations, goals, resources, and support for staff? Let me say also one thing that's very interesting. In this day and age, let me also suggest that our mindset has to change, all right, in terms of how work gets done. And it has to be changed by looking at what I call experimentation. All right, how can we do trial and error? How do we allow for failures? That means as a leader, as a manager, can we change our mindset and allow for people to fail? To do little experiments so that, we can try interesting and new things all the time. All right, so I promised to share strategies, and these are the strategies that I use. But let me say again, while strategies can be learned, I think mindset has to be changed within you. All right, so the first thing to do is, hey, how do we do check-ins? Do we check-ins or do we do continuous monitoring? And you know my answer, check-ins. And in fact, what I've suggested to my colleague is that she checks in the morning. So in the morning, she WhatsApp her staff, 3 things the staff wants to do in the morning. She asks her. At the end of the day, she checks in back. And I think that works pretty well. You may not want to do it daily, but that can work. The next thing is to, of course, create structure. How do we engage each other? All right, how do we communicate? Are you supposed to be on Teams? Are you Microsoft Teams? Are you, how do we communicate using different channels? All right, and what are the expectations? That has to be clearly spelled out. So I think clarity is important. All right, of course, there's a big talk about how we can redesign jobs so that we create maybe more interdependence or maybe less interdependence depending on the nature of the job. More importantly, care for well-being. This is the time when people need a lot more social interaction, a lot more encouragement, a lot more support. And we all can do this via what I call communication. All right, why is communication important? Let me say that you can never over-communicate. In fact, some of the work in the area has recently said that we should do what I call redundant communication. All right, communication via very different channels, online, offline, etc., and communications that are high-tech and high-touch. Because I believe that in this day and age, communications is key, especially when you're remote, when there is no face-to-face. I think there's no way in which you can actually manage without clear communication. All right, and I know my time is up. And in fact, I want to share something really interesting at the end of it all. Let me just take another minute to read you the last 2 paragraphs of a very interesting article I came upon on Thursday this week, written by Hwee, published on the Straits Times. In the Straits Times, it's called The Lost Year. All right, and briefly, it says, at the end of it, he says, still, others prefer to cherish only the good. Now, this talking about COVID 2020, right? They embrace the wind in their windows, the interval for self-care, the friendships made online, the books read and songs we sung, the love shaped with longing eyes, and hidden smiles for simple life. It has become a year no one dutifully brings up, but everyone remembers. All know well how something has changed while behaving as if nothing has. The year came and went, and it never existed. Some consider it a gift of renewal from the gods. Some say that there was a rift in space-time, and that year we entered a parallel universe. And I'd like to suggest that, indeed, we have entered a parallel universe, a universe where we should try to trust our people a little bit more and to change our mindset towards them. With that, I thank you very much for spending this time with me. I look forward to taking your questions later on during the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tan. I think you very accurately described the work from home situation right now amidst this pandemic crisis. I mean, it is after all the new normal, and you really did set my mind at ease. So now if any of you have any questions for Dr. Tan or the panelists later, you can key them in at the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to answer them during the Q&A session later. All right? So up next is our panel discussion with the industry experts as they bring with them different perspectives of the future of work, from a recruitment angle to trade and to the personal capacity. Okay? This panel is moderated by Ms. Wendy Wong, who is the Regional Director for the People at Work. Wendy acts as a trusted advisor to business leaders on senior level talent acquisition, development, and coaching. She enjoys helping people maximize their potential and has a special interest in women's economic empowerment. Without further ado, I will pass the time to Wendy. Wendy, please.
Thank you, Cole. Hello, everyone. I'm Wendy Wong, and I'm delighted to be moderating this topic, matching the workforce of the future to the future of work. This topic is important because how we do work, as what Professor Tan has said, is changing rapidly, and the demand for top talent is becoming more and more competitive. So today, we're going to look at it from three perspectives: the human capital and recruitment perspective, the trade and industry perspective, and the business and individual perspective. With me are our three distinguished panelists: Mr. Eugene Goh, co-founder of TalentKraft; Mr. Mayang Parik, CEO of the Institute of Human Resource Professionals; and Ms. Tan Chi Wei, Vice President of Human Resources for the Northeast and Southeast Asia at Shell. But before I pass this time to our panelists, I would first like to share with you the structure of this session. First, each panelist will share their presentation. After all three panelists have shared, we will then go into a Q&A session. So as we go along, as Cole said, please vote and key in your questions in the chat box below, and I will be here to pick them up. Without much ado, may I present to you our first panelist, Mr. Eugene Goh. Eugene is the co-founder of TalentKraft, a strategy consulting company that focuses on HR topics for SMEs and startups. Prior to this, he spent 8.5 years at the Boston Consulting Group across Singapore, Oslo, and Dubai offices. He has also been in civil service, working in the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Transport. On a side note, Eugene is a Liverpool fan, and when I last spoke to him, he was still celebrating after the club won the English Premier League for the first time in 30 years. So today, Eugene is going to kick off the conversation from a human capital and recruitment perspective. How can you identify the gaps in your organization and find the right talent? Over to you, Eugene.
Thank you, Wendy. I hope you guys can see the screen and you can see me as well. Okay, so let me jump straight in. So how I'm here to talk today about how you find the right talent in the age of uncertainty, and looking at this from a consulting perspective, right? So as a business owner or as HR, what do I need to do in order to get the right answer? I would say that it's almost ironic that at the start of this year, we did our second anniversary party and we ran a panel entitled Vision 2020, The Future is Ours to See. And this was on January 20th. So very clearly, the future is not ours to see. We have entered a new age of uncertainty. And I think it's going to be here for quite a while. So we've been doing quite a lot of discussions and research into what to expect or what we can expect in the coming years, months and years. So the one conclusion we've reached is that normal is further away than you think. So here I will share the thoughts of my good friend, Associate Professor Von Tan, who's at the University College in London. So he does a lot of research into uncertainty and how you deal with this, unpredictable and risky situations. And in fact, he's got a new book out called The Uncertainty Mindset. So very well timed on his part. So we've been discussing what the future holds. And Vaughn makes a couple of, I think, very important points. Number one, even though you might see a lot of news articles saying that vaccines are in the final stage of trials and they're almost ready to go, he has spoken to lots of public health experts, and he says it's at least 18 to 24 months before vaccines will be widely available. One simple reason: if you want to show that a vaccine gives you 12 months of protection, you need to wait 12 months, right? It's as simple as that, right? It just takes a long time to test that the vaccine works and is safe for a prolonged period of time. And secondly, you're talking about scaling up to billions of doses of a medication, right? And that's generally not something that can be done just at a snap of a finger. So if you think vaccines are the key to normality, which is what many people say, then it's at least 18 to 24 months away. Therefore, you can expect repeated and unpredictable disruptions to the economy and daily life. I think if we had this webinar about a month ago, people would start to say, well, it looks like it's over, things are getting better, countries are opening up. Today, if you look at the Straits Times, there's 4 or 5 countries that thought they had beaten the disease: Hong Kong, Australia, Japan, and they've all reported higher than ever infections. And another important point that people often forget: the global economy is so interconnected that any disruption to any part of the supply chain can knock out global supply chain, right? Whether it's for vehicles, whether it's for mobile phones. And so the problem becomes that there's always a weak link, and you might get a outbreak in a factory that produces, one little fastener, but without this fastener, you can't make a phone, right? So there will be lots of unexpected disruptions. So one implication of this is that many previous business models are gone for now and may never come back, right? So what businesses need to think about is much more fundamental than just surviving three to 6 months. And I think another implication which fits with what Professor Tan said is that working from home is almost certainly here to stay. So what does this mean for businesses? Businesses will need to adapt, and HR will need to support. What do I mean? So here are four important ideas to share. One, beware of excessive optimism. So I ran a webinar maybe about a month ago, and we asked the audience, when will business return to normal? More than half the audience thought within 12 months. Right, so I think we are much less optimistic that it will go back to normal within 12 months. So businesses need to prepare for a much longer period of disruption. And that's why you need to embrace this new normal. And the difference is, I spoke to many companies, and they still have the same mindset now, that they are just waiting for things to return to normal, instead of asking themselves, what do I do to thrive in the new situation if the new situation turns out to be long-term, right? What does this look like? It talks about evolving new business models. So my favorite example of this is that Noma, which was the world's #1 restaurant. They used to make very fancy, 30-course meals with one bite of each flavor. They reopened as a takeaway burger bar, because they figured that is the only way that they will be able to make enough money to survive the crisis, right? So I don't think enough businesses are asking themselves this question. I want to focus a bit more on the question of robust operational models, right? And I think that's about thinking very deliberately around how we operate as a company. I think Professor Tan touched on a few points, which is, what is work? How do we work? How do we manage? I think if you accept that work from home is here to stay, then you would need to think much more seriously about what I need to do to support working from home, and not the kind of, sticky tape together a kind of policy that most companies have done over the last couple of months. Another implication, and one I want to focus on today, is if you accept that the old way of everybody come to the office and talking and meeting face to face is not going to be a stable equilibrium for the next 12 to 24 months, then if you're going to recruit, you need to ask yourself, how can I recruit contactlessly, right? Hire the right people without even meeting them. So as good consultants, I have a framework for us to think about this question. So I think of it as the 4 Ps of rethinking HR. And this applies whether you are looking at performance management, recruiting, comp and ben. It's a way of systematically thinking through the problem. So number 1, the people. Who do you have? What's in your team? What are their priorities, their preferences, their level of resilience? Number 2, policy. What are the rules that govern how things are run? Which leads us to number 3, the process itself, how things are actually done, the tools, the steps that you need to get a leave approved or a claim approved or anything like that. And the last thing I think is perception. And this again fits very well with what Professor Tan said about communication and managing people's anxieties and uncertainties. I'll talk mostly about the first 3 for today, with a focus on this question of contactless hiring of the right talent. Before we even get into the question of contactless hiring or the right talent, first, who is the right talent? Let's look at the people that you want to hire. So couple of thoughts here. I'm not saying that this is the age of introverts or you need to throw away your old recruiting manual, but for companies that had a very clear definition of who is the right fit for your company, you might need to re-examine that in the light of the emerging research on what working from home requires from people, right? So I was asked at the previous webinar, is this the age of the introvert? People who don't need to see other people are going to take over the world. I think it's not quite so simple as that, but it requires us as a HR team, as a company, to seriously examine the question, who do we want to hire? Who is the right fit for us, right? So for example, extroverts, they thrive on team dynamics and interaction with people. Will this cause them to become less effective if they're stuck from home? What is the importance of things like conscientiousness and discipline? I think Prof. Tan mentioned that before, that she was saying, agreeableness seems to be a strong correlation with how well people perform while working from home. So I don't know what the answer is for your company, but I know that this is a question that you need to think about. And one dimension of people I wanted to throw in is, don't forget your managers. Don't assume that your managers can seamlessly transition from old way of working to new way of working. They also need certain support to get there. Second question is, as an interlink of policy and people, if you are now used to working from home or working remotely, then actually there's the opportunity to take your talent pool global, right? Because it might be a problem if everybody comes in and works together and then one person is far away on the phone. If everybody is on the phone and on video conference, does it really matter what the makeup of your team is? So we at TalentKraft, we ran with this in a totally, we've gone slightly maybe crazy on this, but we have actually a global team of interns. So, the Singaporeans on the top, there are 3 Saudi ladies who have joined us and are working with us on some of the Middle East initiatives. And then there's Joaquin, who is from Chile. So it is obviously some complexity, but I think as a company, the question is, do we always need to hire in the location if people are going to be working remotely anyway? Okay, next, the concept of your team should also evolve, right? Contracting terms, for example, do you still need everybody to be full-time permanent employees, or would you move towards a mixture of part-time, contract, freelance, project, all kinds of different different contract mixes. And I think this is quite important because if you believe that there will be disruptions, so surge in demand followed by pullback at the next lockdown, then you need to have that kind of flexibility built in. So there used to be a joke that you know you've reached the future of work when you don't know who you're supposed to invite to your office party. I think this is going to become even more serious. And of course, the joke is there is no more office party because you can't gather that many people in one place. I'll talk a bit about process as well. And of course, this is a bit where TalentKraft does a lot of our work. So I'll just click through this quite quickly. I think we see 6 steps. Again, which of these do you need to redesign in order to be able to hire contactlessly? So define and target, I think we've talked about a little bit in terms of who is the profile you're trying to hire. I'm quite interested in the next 3 steps, which is source, screen, and interview, right? Reaching out to more candidates, filtering them down to the most appropriate ones, and then using interviews in the right way, because one of the big challenges people face, I can't see the candidate face to face. I can't look into their eyes and discern what's in their soul. How do I still hire them, right? And of course, there's a last step, which is winning offers and onboarding. So it's super important that if you want to hire well and build a good team, you need to onboard people, again, contactlessly, right? So you need to think about all of these steps. So quickly run through, I think sourcing. One important thing is you need to go beyond the basic job boards or Straits Times Classified. Think about how can you grow your reach, including overseas, right? So whether it's things like competitions or hackathons, whether it's doing webinars or content marketing for talent, there are many things you can think about. In fact, your marketing team and your recruiting team should sit down and say, if we were selling our jobs, how would we go about doing it most effectively? Tools that can help you screen the right talent. So here are just 3 I wanted to highlight. Video interviews are quite a good way to test things like communication, presence, gravitas, without having to set up all these very troublesome calls and online discussions. So asynchronous video interviews, you set the questions, they record, you watch when it's convenient, is a good way to expand your hiring pool. This one we are quite proud of. So we ourselves built a chatbot that does case interviews. So if you wanted to test business skills, like how do you structure a problem, what data do you get, how do you analyze it, how do you come to judgment, there's already tools that can do this, but there are also other aptitude tests like coding tests, industry knowledge tests. So using these tests to help you narrow down the people that you want to interview. And finally, there's also personality tests. And if you accept the premise that the kind of personality of the people you're hiring is more important now that they're working from home and not in teams, then personality tests become very useful. One last point here, again, don't underestimate the need for prep for contactless interviews, right? So it's not just that we'll just let people do whatever they want. You need to standardize the format, align on what you're looking for, and probably also train your interviewers on online interviewing. For example, how do you conduct, how long do you wait before you check whether the person is just thinking or his internet has broken down, right? Where do you look when you're running an online interview? It's very important to do a dry run, look for technical errors, make sure that your room is well lit. So don't underestimate the prep needed for contactless interviews, because the candidates are also assessing the company and not just you assessing the candidates. So, just to summarize, I think there is no simple answer. But if you accept that the new normal is what we are in now, periods of uncertainty and disruption, then you need to embrace it. To embrace it, you need to rethink how your company works. And we think that starting by thinking through these 4 Ps for each of any of the things you are trying to change is a very good way for you to make sure that you don't miss out on anything important. So thank you very much for listening to me. I'm happy to connect with you guys, or if you have any questions, just drop me an email or type in your questions in the Q&A, and we can take it up during the panel discussion itself. Back to you, Wendy.
Thank you, Eugene. You have certainly started the ball rolling and given us a very good platform to invite our next panelist. Our next panelist, Mr. Mayang Parekh, CEO of the Institute of Human Resource Professionals, IHRP. IHRP is the HR professional body in Singapore that defines HR standards and implements Singapore's national HR certification framework as a benchmark for HR skills. Mayang is highly passionate about advocating fair opportunities for every individual in the workplace. He has over 20 years of experience in regional and global HR and general management roles. Today, Mayang will share from a trade and industry perspective, how can we equip HR with the right tools to find the perfect match? Over to you, Mayang.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Many of you may not have heard of us, as we are a new HR professional body formed by the tripartite partners in 2016 to professionalize and strengthen the HR practice in Singapore. So we aim to build a HR community that effectively unlocks the potential of people and businesses to adapt and transform. And we do it through setting professional standards and partnering with consulting companies, training providers to build HR capabilities in organizations. So today we have over 2,000 HR professionals certified by us across 4 levels, from certified associates all the way to master professionals. Now you've just heard Eugene talk about identifying the right talent in the age of uncertainty. And I would like to focus on how we can equip HR with the tools to manage change during this disruptive time. Can you see my screen? Let me first set the context. Even before COVID, our economy has been transforming. The global environment is undergoing deep structural shifts, and this has been accelerated by the devastating impact of COVID. And despite the challenging global environment that we face today, there are many opportunities for Singapore.
Mayang,
yes?
Sorry to disrupt. We can't see the slides.
Okay, let me just try again.
Lovely, we see it now. Now we have
Okay.
it on, you need to put it on the presentation mode.
All right. Is that fine?
Perfect, thank you, Mayang.
All right. And so I was mentioning that there are many opportunities for Singapore. The digital economy presents opportunities to transform industries, while new technologies are helping to raise productivity in traditional sectors like manufacturing. And there is a strong market potential in many Asian markets and emerging markets. And Singapore is well poised to tap on the several growth sectors that are out there. The rise of the middle class, urbanization in Asia will increase demand for many sectors, including finance, hub services, logistics, and so on. But there are also ominous clouds in the horizon. The proportion of the Singapore population above the age of 65 will grow from 14% last year to 25% by 2030. And this presents enormous challenges to maintaining a vibrant economy here. So most CEOs struggle with talent, people problems. And when we ask CEOs what are their top 3 challenges, and a distinct pattern emerges. And the majority of their challenges map back to people's strategy and talent management. So it's no surprise their number one challenge is finding the right talent. And in fact, 4 of the top 5 challenges CEO mentioned relate to talent. So it is no surprise, therefore, that there has been a rising expectation of the role of HR. They are seen as custodians of organization talent, and these are some of the expectations that CEO expect from HR. Firstly, the HR leader needs to play an important role in enabling agility in the organization. And to do so, however, requires agility on the part of the HR team itself, who must serve as the architect of a new and enhanced business initiative essential for the organization's future. And this has to be done while continuing to support HR's vital operational activities. Second, HR must also develop the digital business acumen to understand how technical skills fit into the workplace and how best to make use of people as organizations implement digital technologies and unlock greater business value. Next, as technology gives rise to new ways of working, new work options may also include automation. The work itself needs to be continually reinvented. HR needs to orchestrate this. There are many options of getting work done now, and we need to determine which is the best combination of human talent and automation to keep up with the perpetual work in reinvention. HR must now make continuous learning and reskilling a core component of the employment contract. Next, to rethink culture and leadership. Attracting and engaging a global multi-generational workforce that may include gig workers and partners requires an inclusive culture that extends beyond traditional organizational boundaries, so that talents feel vested in a common purpose and mission. So HR must be able to lead people in a non-hierarchical, fluid work environment and empower talents at the front line to solve problems and create innovative solutions. And finally, we need to elevate HR decision science from predicting talent shortages to enhancing the talent experience, to making better business case for HR investments. Decision science and analytics enables HR leaders to progress beyond anecdotal to evidence-based thinking, critical to having an impact as business executives. So I believe the call to action represents an opportunity for HR leaders to chart a new path, and as they prioritize growth opportunities and prepare for the future. So we and IHRP, we have introduced a series of skill badges to recognize these new skills and competencies that will ensure that the ongoing impact to a constantly evolving workplace. These are micro-credentials that will allow you to keep, manage, and collect and share your competencies in emerging HR specializations, as well as demonstrate your future readiness to the industry. And details are available on our website. I just want to now touch on some of the frameworks that HR professionals can use in order to think through talent in a crisis. First, diagnose. Updating your business strategy doesn't mean uprooting your business operating model altogether, but your plan, if it involves reduction in force, role changes, it does mean consolidating and altering existing teams. And you will then need to create possibly new managers and working relationships. So what existing roles will cease due to the crisis? What new functions will be opened? Which people are fit for some of these new roles? Is restructuring needed to allocate this talent and minimize cost? And how might this downturn impact the current job functions? And should we consider reductions in spending or in workforce? So recalibrating your strategy will involve tough decisions, and senior leaders will be tasked with assessing the strengths of the business and by extension, the underlying components, resources, and people under the purview. And they'll be faced with having to make decisions about which capabilities to retain and which to let go. Second is adaptive, enabling agility in the workforce. Your company could sit at the forefront of innovation and cutting-edge technology, but when a crisis hits, we may not have the luxury of continuing with some of these high-risk activities. And instead, you may need to refocus on retaining your existing customers and you're really looking at your existing products. And until you stabilize yourself in an uncertain market, it's what you know. It's what you know and what products you have that will make the difference. So having that agility to adapt to the changing circumstances is something that HR professionals need to help talents to do. Next, it is common to refer to a reduction process exercise as downsizing. And after you've pared down the various costs from overheads to payroll, but certainly I think you need to also focus on whom you need to cut, which functions to eliminate, but you cannot ignore what is critical for your success, the people that you want to keep. And it's important to determine how you will realign your organization around these resources that you want to retain. And to focus on the underlying drivers of productivity and engagements, which is job fit. Is their job fit? The job's changing, are talents still fit for the job? Are managers fit to lead the organization during this time? And finally, do we have the right team dynamics within the organization to get the solutions going? Finally, engage. Through a thoughtful internal communication plan, and Professor Tan talked about it, we can swiftly address employees' fears, anxieties, and maintain focus despite a changing environment. Communication is an important part of an effective, deliberate crisis strategy. Executives should take some simple steps to stay ahead of events and retain control of their operations. And some of these steps are derived from proven crisis, disaster management best practices. Finally, I just want to touch on grants and tools. I'm not going to have the time to go through each and every one here, but I just want to spend time on the Human Capital Diagnostic Tool. This is a national HR diagnostics tool, which is led by WSG and the Ministry of Manpower. And it's to help organizations gain valuable insights on the human capital maturity of the organization. The tool holistically assesses the organization's state of HR across 11 different key HR process areas, and it incorporates features to allow the organization a comprehensive diagnostic on what capabilities, competencies they need to have in this new environment, as well as what perceptions of human practices are currently prevailing within the organization. So I would encourage organizations out there to learn more about this tool. Details are also on our website. And currently we have a COVID support package for SMEs where this tool is complementary. Eugene also talked about many tools, screening tools, talent identification tools. There are also a host of plethora of tools out there. So know your tools. The HR Tech SG publishes an annual Singapore HR Tech market map. Details are available online. So I encourage you to kind of use this as a starting point to understand which tools you need, which works for you, and how you can leverage on some of these technologies to get work done more productively and effectively in a changing environment. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to the Q&A session later on. Thank you. Over to you, Wendy.
Thank you, Mayang. Now for our third panelist, Ms. Tan Hwee. Hwee is currently the Vice President of the Human Resources for Northeast and Southeast Asia at Shell, where she is responsible for the people agenda across 10 markets and 13,000 employees. A highly experienced HR professional, Hwee is also the recent alumna of the Singapore Management University Lee Kong Chian School of Business, where she also won the DBS Top Student Award. And when I asked her what was the biggest thrill of that, she says, without hesitating, she says it's about having her daughters there with her when she won the award. And that's super heartwarming. So today, Hwee is going to share with us from a business and personal perspective on the question that may be hovering over our minds, which is this the right time to invest in self-improvement? And is postgraduate the way to go? So Hwee, may I pass this time over to you?
Hey, thank you, Wendy. And hi, everyone. Good morning. I am Hwee. Really happy to be here as part of the panel. So having heard from Prof. Tan and my fellow panelists, Eugene and Mayang, on their views on the workforce of the future and the future of work, let me now weigh in on my view of the new challenges which have been uncovered and accelerated by the pandemic. What this means to organizations, really in a very layman's sort of understanding of what I'm seeing daily, and what this means to us as leaders and ultimately as individuals in our journey of self-improvement. So let me start with a view of what this pandemic has brought to the fore as key priorities for most organizations. It is a view, my view, depending, of course, on your industry, your sector, your circumstances, of course. But I would guess that this view is one which would resonate with many of us. It's been a time and continues to be a time for care, continuity, and cash, right? 3 C's, where first and foremost, we need to manage the health impact of the crisis, ensuring the well-being of our staff, our customers, our community, and also a time where we focus on the continuity of our operations, ensuring that we continue to be able to deliver the products and services to our customers and continuing to earn their trust as we navigate through all sorts of contingencies and challenges. And in addition to that, also a time when we have to deal with the economic impact of reduced global demand and to deal with having to preserve cash and ensuring that we are ready to recover and to emerge stronger from this crisis. So keeping the 3 C's in mind on cash, care, and continuity, I'm sure that every one of us can relate in a very personal way in the last months as to how the pandemic really obeys no speed limits, right? So organizations have had to really navigate through this crisis You know, putting, for example, safe management measures in place in our work sites, jumping through the many hoops around circuit breakers, safe restart approvals, you know, ensuring the continuity of our operations for those providing essential products and services, and then deal with financial impacts as well. So what does this mean? It really means that, you know, we've had to make much faster decisions, often without having complete information and data as things are unfolding real time and circumstances just keep changing. There is, at a time like this, very little tolerance for any slow-moving hierarchies and multi-level bureaucracies, right? Everything and everyone in the organization is challenged to really speed up. And I think that also, given all that uncertainty and the speed that's required to make decisions as well on the fly, it calls for much shorter cycles for organizations to be implementing changes, you know, executing things, whether it's your customer responses, your supply chain adjustments, your production decisions, diverting of resources, and so on. And shorter cycles call for a lot more experimentation. I think Prof. Tan mentioned that. Bolder judgment calls, immediate corrections, frequent adjustments, according to, you know, new feedback and new developments. So this actually calls for everyone in the organization, top to bottom, leaders at all levels, to take on more responsibility for action and really strengthening that execution muscle throughout the workforce. People in your teams who need to troubleshoot, keep their eyes on the ball, and, you know, and with agility and judgment to actually on the organizational challenges side, and really talking about the need for us, you know, at all levels in the organization to step up, right, in terms of taking on more responsibility and in making the right judgment calls. And as well, then under these conditions, as the other panelists as well as Prof. Tan have said, that real-time collaboration becomes even more important than ever. And that extends to the virtual world as we get into work from home mode, work from anywhere mode, and also fully virtual or hybrid teams with some people who are on-site, others who are remote. So organizations will really face the challenge of unleashing nimble teams that are fast and focused and cross-functional, really having your best people, your best talent working on the hardest problems that you have to solve, right? Empowered, because if they can't solve it, then no one can. So, so you know, in summary, I think from an organizational challenges perspective, you have the 3 C's, which you have to keep focusing as your priorities, but also the need in the organization to speed up, to step up, and to team up. And how are leaders feeling, right? And managing and trying to balance all of that. So that brings me to the current slide that you're seeing. And you'll see that, you know, these are some comments from C-suite leaders. And I'm sure that resonates with many of us here, describing how many of us are feeling nowadays. So there's a lot of pressure, you know, you're asked to demonstrate empathy, but as well as to remain highly engaged. You know, people expect your leadership not just to be making a positive impact to the business, but to people's lives as well. It's a once in a lifetime, once in a century crisis that nobody has been prepared for. And you know, yet for all of the experiences and the expertise that we bring, we are grappling with the many questions for which we don't have any answers, right? Even as our teams look to us for those answers. So it's a rather unsettling time for us leaders. And if you move to the next slide, actually there is a lot that's expected from leaders anyway. I think there's a previous slide to this, if you don't mind. Yeah, no, not this one, but the next. Well, it's all right. Well, let me just verbalize that. So what I'm saying is that actually there's a lot that's expected of leaders anyway, whether there is a pandemic or no pandemic. And to boil it down to a few key expectations, I think leaders under any circumstances are expected to continue to maximize performance, maintaining the commercial focus to deliver results, and balancing short and long-term outcomes. Leaders are expected to be building trust, not just internally with your own teams, but also with your external stakeholders and your customers outside of the organization. And to strengthen your long-term relationships, deliver on your promises, oftentimes also including making really contributions as well to the community and to the society visibly. And leaders are expected to also live your values, right? Being true to your purpose and also disciplined in maintaining the standards that are important to you and your organization and communicating those expectations clearly. Also showing your care and support to the well-being of your staff and to your stakeholders. And leaders are also required to keep your teams engaged and inspired, right? Have them rally around the purpose and the mission with a lot of pride. And so under the weight of all of these expectations, which are there anyway under normal circumstances, what really makes the difference with managing change brought about by the pandemic and to thrive in a new normal, in addition to all this? So in my view, it's the absolute need for us to learn and adapt in these uncertain and unsettling times. So I think as my fellow panelists, as well as Prof. Tan has said, I think the secret sauce to this for leaders, for us individuals at this point in time, is really a big shift in our mindset. So at the heart of the leadership challenge is to have a learner mindset as we manage and navigate through this huge change that we're grappling with, and really learning quickly from our successes and mistakes as we speed up, creating a safe environment for others to speak up and share ideas and make mistakes and recover as we team up, work cross-functionally very quickly, and role modeling and encouraging curiosity and humility as you and others in your organization step up, right? And being inclusive as you encourage others to be part of shaping and developing the solution together, rather than waiting on you as the leader with the right answer. So this is all part of embracing change and adapting as you go along, because there is no tried and tested, and because it's a time when nobody really knows the right answer. So you can see on the slides, I mean, these are a few questions for us to actually think about and reflect. I would encourage you to do that. How do we adopt a learner mindset in terms of our own journey of self-improvement? And while you are grappling with the ongoing challenges of maximizing performance and building trust and communicating and keeping your teams engaged and inspired, how well do you actually recognize the need for yourself to be open to learning, hearing other people's views? How well do you actually speak up and share your own ideas and encourage other people to do so, and to continuously develop yourself with a view of making better decisions, right? And evolving your mindset with the evolving external landscape as well. So yeah, so I would just leave it as that, you know, in terms of the question, is this a good time to be investing in improving yourself? I would say that self-improvement needs to be a constant thing, and probably even more so when the external landscape is one that is the way it is, evolving faster and with more uncertainty and complexity. So it's as good a time now as any other to be doing that. And if I speak about my own experience, having been a recent alumna of SMU's Lee Kong Chian School of Business, it was a very valuable experience for me on many levels, and happy to also share some of that in the Q&A as well.
Thank you, Hwee. That's really fun. Now, so I would like to invite everyone back. So I would like to invite our speaker, Professor Tan Hwee Hoon, and our panelists, Mr. Eugene Goh, Mr. Mayang Parekh, and yourself, Hwee, stay on as we open the floor for Q&A sessions. So I see lots of questions coming in. Keep it coming, and continue to vote for the questions so that I know which ones are the ones that you guys are interested in. All right? But first, panelists, let's first start with a situation that has affected us all. And Hwee, as you said, nobody was prepared for, right? COVID-19. Let's start with Professor Tan. Professor, do you see a shift in skills that leaders or employers will need to succeed post-COVID? Professor?
Thank you, Daphne. No, sorry, Wendy. Thanks, Wendy. Now, the question is, are there skill sets that will become obsolete? Are there skill sets that will take on importance? I think there will be, but I think more than skill sets, like I said in my talk, that it has to be a mindset. it has to be the mindset of the managers of the organization. There's no longer, I have to see you, no longer I have to monitor you. It has to be one where it's built on mutual trust. All right, that I trust that you are here to do good work and you want to do good work. I think my skill sets are relatively easier to acquire, but it is the mindset that has to change. And for us, being Asian, we are also not used to that. We need to see people around. We need to believe that they are working. So I think the key is changing the way we think rather than change the way we do things. I mean, of course, things like performance management has to change. Things like the way we communicate. And I think in a recent article I read, what was really interesting is they said we cannot recreate what we call weak ties, because we have a lot of strong ties. So during this period, the strong ties help us tide over. I'm online all the time with my good friends, my good colleagues, people I work with, and they provide me a lot of emotional support. But what gets the organization going are weak ties. People we sort of don't know very well, but they have information and resources that we need. And that's what we're not able to build during this period. So building, I think, weak ties can go a long way. Like, meeting somebody at it used to be a water cooler. In our business school now, we meet people outside the toilet. Don't ask me why, but it's an interesting thing, right? So because, we don't see each other. So the kind of serendipity of people meeting each other, that's what is missing. And I think we need to do. All right, thank you.
Great, thanks, Professor. I think it is easier said than done, so it's great to learn from your strategies. Now, in terms of hiring direction, Eugene, how have you seen COVID affecting the future of the workforce?
Well, I guess in terms of, in the start of the pandemic, a lot of companies froze their hiring. So it was a kind of a scary time if you were a recruiter, a headhunter, or a job seeker. I think most people sort of are starting to adjust to the new reality. So they're saying, okay, life will still need to go on. We'll still need to hire. So we think that they're starting to move towards that. But as I was saying in my presentation, the idea of a workforce for each company will become different. So I think people will start to experiment with more overseas hiring, remote working, freelancers, gig workers. I like what Prof. Tan said about fast experimentation, right? So I think companies are going to have to try new things, see which ones work, and then scale those up. So if you're expecting a huge economic recovery to drive massive hiring, I don't think that's going to happen either. It's going to be very choppy, but at least companies are starting to hire again.
Great, thank you. From a HR perspective, Mayang, as the environment becomes more complex, what should HR business owners do or consider differently as they appraise their staff? And we also had a question about, whether or not annual appraisals will go. Over to you, Mayang.
Thank you, Wendy. Perhaps I take the second question first. Certainly, I think I get asked that question quite a lot. In an environment where the business is changing, jobs potentially will change, so and expectations are evolving. It's difficult. Performance management is going to be a very difficult exercise. So the important thing is really to kind of have clarity around what these goals are, and that clarity needs to start with your shareholders, with your leadership, in terms of are you clear in terms of what the impact the situation is going to have on your business, and forecasting is going to be very tricky, but you will need to kind of have some degree of expectation for the organization, and this is something that starts with the leadership. And once you have clarity at the top, then I think it's easier to kind of then cascade that further down the organization. And the things that I would do there would be, as we do all the time, make clear that the targets, expectations are specific, they are measurable, they are realistic, and so on and so forth. So I think that's kind of start at the top, get the clarity, and make sure that clarity is pervaded across the organization.
Yeah, that's so important. Thanks, Mayang. Hwee, looking from an organizational standpoint, how should companies now pivot and evolve post-COVID?
So I think that's a big question, and I think firstly it is for us to really come to terms with the fact that COVID-19 has forever changed the experience of being a customer, being an employee, even being a citizen. So I think companies and businesses will need to embrace that shift to virtual working, virtual consuming, virtual socialization. And that means that anything that can be done virtually will be. So exploring all of the associated possibilities of that would be a necessity. Secondly, I also think that concerns about health will continue to be front of mind. So every business will need to understand how it can be part of a new health ecosystem that will dominate people's thinking, whether it's your products, your services, your premises, even your customer value proposition and your employee value proposition as well. And thirdly, I think everyone is spending more time at home, and any creative strategies to enable this, either from a business model perspective, a workforce resourcing perspective, or from a customer perspective, would also be very essential. So I think, those would be a few of the key themes that I think that companies and businesses should think about in terms of pivoting and evolving post-COVID.
Thank you. Thank you. So there seems to be a lot of questions from the audience in terms of, many of us are getting the hang of working remotely. We're getting it, but leading remotely is still a new territory for many of us. So this question comes from Diana, right, where she asked about, I really love this question, Diana, so thank you very much. And it's about, does it really work? Some of the work that we do, for example, she says, many companies send care packs and delivery during circuit breaker. Does it really work to keep employees productive working at home? So, Professor, would you like to take that?
Of course, it's great to get a care pack, but HR cannot be doing it all the time. I think, those are material things. They are small little gestures that show that the organization cares. And at SMU, what was really interesting is along with our care pack, we had a poem by our president. She wrote a really nice little poem that actually touches our heart, and we love it. So it's not, but you can't do this all the time. I think the key is, unfortunately, maybe fortunately, the responsibility goes back to the manager, all right? And to all of us that we're there to support and keep each other afloat. I think it's not like the organization has to do all this all the time. I think if the culture of the organization is one that is of care, that we are interested, like Hwee said, in the well-being of our people, I think that's where the value add comes in. That we're interested in you being optimistic, in being resilient, in being able to overcome and being able to do good work. I think that's where all the little support should come in many different ways. So care packs are great, Diana. I love them too. I got one, and we had all kinds of nuts. So we said the school has gone nuts over us. But the reality is, it has to go beyond that. And it's the day-to-day care that you show to people that goes a long way. So I make it a point actually when, to check in with quite a few of my faculty colleagues and staff colleagues from time to time because of my relationship with them. But again, those are my strong ties. So I really think, the important thing is to find ways, organizations should find ways to create weak ties. People sort of say hello to, you never really get to know them well, but when you need help, you can actually reach out because the face. This person does what, and I can possibly go to that person. So that'll be my response to you. Care packs are great. Keep them coming.
Actually, can I chip in one small point there? I think like the most important thing is not for management to think that just because I send care packs, everything is fine, right? So spending money on small things is not a substitute for building better processes, creating opportunities for engagement. So it's not like I just spend some money and then I don't have to worry about my team anymore. It's nice to have when this comes as a surprise and there's some genuine feeling behind it. But more importantly, thinking about things like how do you build collaboration? Do you have what we have, for example, is like a weekly team lunch. We just sit there, we don't talk about work, but we, on Zoom, talk, just have a chat, right? So creating this weak ties, as Professor Tan was saying. So yeah, CapEx are good, but it's not a substitute for actually building engagement with your team.
Great, thank you.
Sometimes it could be just as simple as sending an email of encouragement, right? And having that awareness that that people are anxious. They're anxious about not just health, but also the jobs, their livelihoods, and then how do you as leaders kind of provide that the comfort, right? And make sure that they feel that they know that you appreciate what they do, regardless of where they are, right? And this is I think an important part of leadership in this time.
Let me just be cheeky and also to chip in a bit here. I think to me, it's the care, not the pack. So it's a visible way of showing care that is felt to employees, but it is the act of the care and not the pack.
Thank you, panelists and audience. As you can see, this is an important element and it's something that everyone's very passionate about. So thank you very much for that. Now I would like to shift our conversation to us as individuals. And many of us may be thinking, is this a good time to invest? Hwee, you have touched on quite a bit on that already. But I'd really like to hear from perhaps Professor in terms of, the postgraduate qualification. And if someone's interested with that, how do they go about thinking about the ROI? We also have a audience who's thinking about weighing paper qualification versus experience and hard work. So Professor, would you like to just start this?
Okay, so the question really is, should I invest? Should I, do another degree? What would that do for me? I think when you think about embarking on a postgrad degree, what is really key is, of course, you're going to have a lot of learning. You're going to have a piece of paper. But what it does for you is also connects you to a broader group of people. So it's the networks too that matter. So I don't think we have ever been able to come up with a specific ROI, like how to calculate what you get for what you put in. But it is the intangibles. It is the intangibles. So in SMU, we have, it's not like I'm selling SMU, but we have a whole range of programs and we have very good alumni. So I teach in some of the, not so much the EMBA, but I teach in the DBA. We have a Doctor of Business Admin program, and we have very esteemed alumni, and the networks do help in some ways. So going back to the question of experience, I'm already in my 50s. Do I go retool myself? I would say yes. Retooling is important regardless of age. Now, the question is, what program is the best fit for you? I think that will be something you want to perhaps come talk to some of us. I'll be happy to talk to some of you if you reach out to me. You know how you can find me online, right? I'm very visible. Just email me and you'll see my email address. I'll be happy to talk to you. I'll be happy to point you to the right people. But I think it's the fit that is important. It's not so much, should I do, upgrading? I think like Hwee said, yes, everybody should, even me. And recently I sat through 6 sessions of a coaching class when I do teach coaching myself, all right? But the key is, it is a good fit. It must be a good fit for you. And then also it must give you access, fortunately or not, to networks that, you would find fulfilling in time to come. Not just people who will help you get jobs, etc., but people who will become your friends for life. And that's what we do at SMU.
Great, thank you. Panelists, anything else you would like to add before I move on?
Yeah, I can just, so a lot of HR professionals also come to us to sort of say, okay, do I invest in a master's or a degree, and I think it's something that that depends on what you really want to do in your career, and certainly I think having a foundation, a strong foundation is important, and I think that's what investing in education brings. It brings you a strong foundation of HR knowledge, for instance. But over and above that foundation, it's also the skills and competencies that you will gather as you progress in your career, and how then do you kind of help provide some of the recognition that you have acquired those skills, and the market's moving more towards micro credentialing as a more agile way of keeping abreast. Things are moving just too quickly, and I think micro credentialing is something that I feel combined with a sound academic focus. This is something that will really bring a lot of value to professionals out there. So IHRP, we are working closely with IHLs, the Institutes of Higher Learning, including SMU, to kind of see how we can combine the strengths that they have in terms of their master programs, their degree programs, how we can combine that with some of the micro credentialing that we plan to bring for HR professionals going forward. So this is an example of partnerships that can add value to professionals.
Great, thank you. Hwee, there was a question on upskilling and reskilling. I think Mayang, you spoke a little bit about that, but Hwee, from a corporation perspective, do you have anything to add?
Well, I would re-emphasize really that it's really a mindset, right? I think whether it's a skilling, mega type of skilling, even thinking about postgraduate certification or other micro types of skilling, I think the key for us to be keeping up with the evolving expectations of employers, given the increasing complexities of the external landscape that we have to deal with, I think it calls for the mindset to be consistently sort of seeking and learning and adapting. And so that in itself, I think is a skill, is a mindset that, that we are better off acquiring sooner rather than later, in my view. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, panelists. Our time is almost up. And as a closing, I would like to invite all of your thoughts, right? But it's in 15, 30 seconds. And the question I'd like to ask you is the one that is highly voted from Alvin Pua. And he asked, for industries that are in survival mode, keeping the company afloat is top priority at this time, right? And focus on employees take the back seat. So your last thoughts on that question, what can you bring to shift that in such a situation? So let's start again. Perhaps, Eugene, you'd like to go first?
Yeah, sure. I think the point is they shouldn't be in conflict, right? Because your people are the ones that, your people are your company, and without the people, there is no company. So the point is how to find alignment and focus on those areas. And maybe, yes, you reduce costs and you have some pressures, but there must be areas of alignment where the people strategy and the company strategy work together. So focus on those.
Super, thank you. Professor?
I'm aligned with Eugene. It's quite clear that, if you don't have people, you don't have company, and you enact your strategies through your people. So rather than say that, it is an issue, they're in conflict, they come together. And I agree absolutely that you should find ways of, I think more importantly, communicating the fact that you care for them and you want the best. And if the company's not doing well, it's not because, in other words, I think show them that despite the company not doing well, you're doing everything to keep the company afloat. And if you need to retrench them, unfortunately, I use the word retrench, it's because the company is not doing well. And it's not because, you personally are flawed, etc. I think what happens, we've seen in previous recessions, etc., in the research we do, is that when, companies not doing well and they're very transparent about the processes they go through to make sure they keep the people and keep them happy. People do want to come back and work for them. And that's the key. People must see that you are not putting them at second place. They are first place, and they need to be at the front of all your strategies. That'll be my point. Yes, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. You've really nailed it in terms of the way we think, and we've got to think about that. So let's move on to Mayang. What do you think?
Yeah, I make it quick. It's more critical now to focus on trust, employees' trust, and this is because having trust in the organization's senior leaders is a key driver for engagement, and studies have shown that time and time again. So if your workforce doesn't trust you, they won't be emotionally invested in your success. So, but if they do trust you, they care enough to give it their all, and this is when you need it. so that's my take.
Thank you, Mayang. And last but not least, Hwee.
Yeah, so I think I touched a little bit on that when I talked about the 3 C's, right? Care, continuity, and cash. And I think the question is really about sort of cash, being the ultimate concern and other things being secondary. Well, I don't see it that way. I think that the challenge that we're facing is really balancing all 3, care, continuity, and cash, not one at the expense of the other.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, panelists, Professor Tan Hoon, Mr. Eugene Goh, Mr. Mayang Parekh, and Ms. Tan Hwee for your thoughts today. And to our audience, we've come to a close on this panel discussion, which is matching the workforce of the future to the future of work. I hope you found this session useful as you navigate through the workplace of the future. Now, I recognize and I want to thank the audience for asking lots of questions. So I see lots of other questions there, and I want to recognize, thank you very much for your questions. And don't worry, although we've not managed to cover it today on the panel, the EDGE editorial team will collect and answer them post this session. So now I'd like to pass this time back to Cole. Over to you, Cole.
Okay, thank you very much, Wendy, for moderating this panel discussion, as well as our speakers, Eugene, Mayang, Hwee, and Dr. Tan for sharing your insights. I'm very sure that this webinar has been helpful for everyone that joined in this morning. So if you are interested in pursuing further studies, you may check out Singapore Management University Executive MBA program, which graduates will be fully equipped to take advantage of fast evolving markets, resources, and capabilities in Asia. So you will be prompted to do a survey at the end of the webinar. Otherwise, you can also scan the QR code on your screen and it will take you to do the quick survey. Our webinar slides and recording will be sent to those who participate in the survey itself. So at this point, I'd like to wish you to have a good weekend and see you at our next event. Thank you.